Hey everyone, I updated my Patreon page and added new rewards. First of all, everyone who pledges to me will be added to my Patreon exclusive Discord server in case you want to chat with me. Besides that, you can now also request me to review cartoon episodes, movies or even entire seasons. Check out the link in the description or at the end of this video if you want to support me. It's highly appreciated. You know, I noticed that MLP really doesn't like the good guys to have magic. Have you noticed that? The entire plot of School Race was that Cozy Glow stole everyone's ability to use magic. 2 seasons earlier we had To Where and Back Again, in which no one could use magic because of Crystalla's throne. And then there was a movie in which no one really bothered to use magic beside Cadence, who was turned into stone as a result, while the other princesses just stood there waiting to be catch-up as well. I mean really, even if those stones are unaffected by magic, there was nothing that stops them from teleporting or just blasting Fizzlepop into oblivion. Like really, watch that movie. Twilight does little magic throughout it beyond some telekinesis. Which is kinda weird when you consider that the entire plot of that thing is about stealing her magic. This has become somewhat of a pet peeve of mine. It seems to me that the writers are simply unable to write a conflict worthy of a two-parter without taking away the hero's power if they don't just ignore them, that is. Only Shadowplay is a bit of an exception in that regard, as it's not only allowed Starlight and Twilight to use magic, but also brought back the elements of harmony, so the writers can't think of an excuse not to use them when the next big bad shows up. But while Shadowplay allowed Twilight and Starlight to keep their magic, it is probably the best example to showcase why the writers like to take that power away. The Pony of Shadows shows up and gets rather easily overpowered by the combined effort of Twilight and Starlight. Sure, the show handwaves it that he wasn't at full power at the time, but it also doesn't really try to show that there's actually more to him. For all intents and purposes, Stygian comes off as pretty weak compared to pretty much every other villain that has come so far. The whole plan to sacrifice the elements of harmony appears as rather pointless as a result when Celestia, Luna, Cadence and Twilight could simply gang up on him and kick him back into limbo. Well, and this is the core of the issue. The showrunner sort of made the protagonists too powerful, and they are just getting more powerful and gain more resources as time goes on, which makes it harder to give them an actual challenge. Now there's a case to be made that this has been a problem for the show since the very beginning. In fact, Celestia's and Luna's mere existence is pretty much the major problem the show just can't wrap its head around. The show makes a big deal out of the fact that they are so powerful and likes us to remind us of that, but mostly by telling us that they are powerful instead of actually showing it. That being said, I would say this wasn't really a problem in the earlier seasons of the show. It was mostly the fandom that assumes that Alicons are that much more powerful, when in actuality there was little to actually back that up. The only thing people could bring up is that they can move the sun and the moon, which sounds like a big feat, but might as well be a rather difficult spell that only they can cast because it's their special talent. Only because Celestia knows a spell that can move the sun, it doesn't automatically mean that she can also unleash powerful energy beams that can blow up mountains. But more importantly, combat was never an actual option in the first couple of seasons. The villains were usually portrayed as rather untouchable, and the main 6 had to use some MacGuffin to defeat them. I mean, the elements of harmony were pretty much written out of the show, so the main 6 can't just always use them to solve their problems, which is why it really annoyed me when Shadowplay brought them back with no negative repercussions. One of the big reasons why the early villains of MLP seem so untouchable is that magic evolved rather strangely over the course of the series. When you go back and watch the first couple of seasons, you will notice that Twilight was rather limited in what her magic could do. And remember, Twilight is supposed to be an exceptional talented unicorn, but in Ghostbusters the show straight up tells us that she can only do 25 spells at a time, with one being that moustache spell. Besides some rather impressive feats of telekinesis, her magic was limited to some tricks and some mind alteration like that wanted needed spell from lesson 0, or the time she tried to alter the behavior of para sprites, which is another point. Magic was much more prone to backfire. The first offensive use of magic wasn't until a Canterlot wedding, where we got the showdown between Celestia and Chrysalis, and Twilight using her magic against some random changelings. Twilight's attacks were basically just small bolts of energy that weren't that much more effective than Applejack kicking a changeling. And the duel between Celestia and Chrysalis compares that fight to magic duels in later seasons. It was dramatic back then, but nowadays that scene is downright pathetic. And this is where we get into the meat of things, because the straw that broke the camel's back was the portrayal of magic in season 4. The writing team was suddenly much more action oriented and wanted to deliver some cool fights. The first one was a fight between Nightmare Moon and Celestia and Princess Twilight Sparkle, and of course the big one, the duel between overcharged Twilight and Tyrek. The difference between those two fight scenes and the ones we saw in A Canterlot Wedding is like night and day. It is not that the characters have been made substantially more powerful, but the writing team increased the amount of things magic could do. This has become more apparent as time went on and Starlight was introduced. People like to say that she is overpowered, but I tend to disagree. I think if Twilight was a unicorn, she could perform similar feats. The issue is that the writers removed any sorts of restraints magic had. There are no rules and it can do pretty much anything the plot demands, but also comes with the problem the fighting scene is less Harry Potter now and more Dragon Ball Z. But now that the heroes can fight back, even if they are outclassed, the villains don't appear so untouchable anymore. Suddenly, they are something that can be reasonably overcome with enough force. Twilight can't do it on her own, bring in Starlight. Still not enough, bring in Celestia, and so on. Now, in theory, this could be solved by introducing a villain that is so much more powerful that challenging him to a fight would be out of the question. But MLP shot itself in the foot, as they already introduced him, Discord. Discord is basically as powerful as you can be. He is pretty much all powerful and basically the one thing that kept the Alicons in check throughout the first 4 seasons. Celestia was unable to do anything about him in The Return of Harmony, his seeds kidnapped both Luna and Celestia and Princess Twilight Sparkle, and Tyrek only became a threat because Discord helped him. After Tyrek absorbed Discord's magic, he became in theory stronger than the Draconicus, but that is debatable as Tyrek never really showcased the same level of skill as Discord. But if we take the battle between Twilight and Tyrek at face value, then the magic of all 4 Alicon princesses is as powerful as the magic of Discord and all other ponies in Equestria combined. So even he arguably lost his untouchable status. And that's the unfortunate implication. If Twilight and the other princesses in theory can utilize their combined power to take on Tyrek in that state, there's no villain that can really challenge them in terms of power. Introducing a new bad guy who is more powerful than Discord, who can already alter reality to his will, in every new season would be ridiculous. They can do that maybe one more time before the show ends, and they have to do it carefully. The alternative is to write a conflict that can't be solved with brute force or bring the main cast in a situation where they can't just call Discord or Celestia for help. And to some degree they are doing this in episodes like The Crystalling and School Days, with mixed results. But those episodes also have no actual villain, unless you want to count Naysay and Flurry Heart. But more often than not, they just remove the cast's ability to use magic or simply ignore the obvious solution, which just seems a bit lazy. The only 2-parter that actually managed to avoid this problem altogether was the Cutie Remark. While people like to complain that Starlight was overpowered in that one and managed to fight Twilight on equal terms, which can be considered a part of the overall problem of how magic has evolved over the course of the show, it doesn't really matter. Starlight managed to put Twilight in a position in which her magical powers didn't matter at all. The fact that Starlight was capable to keep up with Twilight was more for the spectacle than for plot reasons. So it is possible, but there's no general solution to this problem. If the whole conflict can be resolved by overpowering the opponent, the show is poorly equipped to handle it. Now I think it can be done, but if you want an example, I would basically need to devote an entire video describing of how I would handle an MLP 2-parter. I'm considering doing that at some point, but not today. That being said, it hardly really matters at this point. If MLP really ends after season 9, they can use that one bad guy who is more powerful than Discord in the series finale and be done with it. As much as I love MLP, it is a prime example of how not to handle a magic system. The only reason it can get away with it is because at the end of the day, MLP is a slice of life comedy and not an action show. Most problems in the show can't be solved with violence. But what about you? What are your thoughts on magic in MLP? Let me know in the comments. I am Tricky Fox. Stay foxy.
Sly as a fox, you got me under your spell. But you know I'll never tell that I know you know so well. Sometimes you can be too smart to fall. You're